reminiscing on the 25th anniversary of No Goal, coming up here in the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Special show for you today. It is the 25th anniversary of Game 6. Sabres, Stars, No Goal, the controversy, memory lane. I've got some text from some of our listeners about what happened on that night. We'll get to some other things, including the Sabres and their available cap space. What we expect from them in terms of how much of their cap they're going to spend, especially since in the news today, there's another Eastern Conference opponent that is making a big swing. Travis Yost reporting that the New Jersey Devils are trading for Flames star goaltender Jacob Markstrom. That's a big domino in the East. That's a team that missed the playoffs last year, that's very talented, that's biggest problem was goaltending, and they just went out and got the best goaltender that's on the market. So we'll talk about the Sabres offseason a little bit today, and also the finals. Connor McDavid, 4 more points. Edmonton stays alive. Is this going to go down as the greatest performance in a playoff series or a playoffs ever if they come back and win it? McDavid having this type of production, and if they could do something that's never been done, which is come back from 3-0 down in a Stanley Cup final. In fact, looking around even at the other sports, NBA and the World Series, the last time a team in any of the major sports came back from a 3-0 deficit was the 1941 Stanley Cup final. So I guess in essence it has happened, but you know, we're not even in television. Are we even in black and white TV? Those games probably weren't even televised. It was so long ago. We're talking about 80 years since this has happened. And the Oilers are halfway there. So we'll talk a little bit about McDavid a little bit today as well. If you want to reach out to the show, text line is always the best way to do that. If you're not already a texter, join subtext.com/lockedon to sign up and get started there. You can reach out on our YouTube channel, or you could also do that on Twitter at Sneaky Joe Sports or at Locked On Sabres. I do have a poll running that is related to our second topic of today's show. So be sure to check us out on Twitter as well. There's really nothing newsworthy happening with the Sabres today. Really, the news in the league is Oilers continue to stay alive, and Markstrom is on his way to New Jersey. At time of recording, we don't have details on that trade just yet. It is the 25th anniversary of No Goal. That's what today is. The big day in Buffalo sports history. It's one of the most important days in Buffalo sports history. It's right up there with the Super Bowls from the Bills. It's probably the most important day in Sabres history. It's not the most positive day, but momentous. The lore that was written that night, the stories. I love listening to the stories from people that were in the building. Or we had Paul Hamilton on this morning at WGR, and his account of going down to the locker room and seeing Lindy just be so beside himself, and Lindy going out on the bench to yell at Bettman while the cup was being awarded, and his post-game presser. I found on YouTube, actually, the whole Game 6 broadcast that's 5 hours long, and it extends past overtime into the post-game that ESPN had and into SportsCenter. And you get all the reaction. You get Brian Engblom giving a report outside the Sabres locker room. This is probably 20 minutes after the goal had been scored. And Brian Engblom giving a report about how the Sabres they have kind of barricaded themselves in the locker room. They are not coming out until the NHL comes down and explains to them why this goal is counting. And Lindy stories, of course, as I just mentioned, the thing about the bench, his post-game press conference, a piece of it is on that broadcast. And there's a good 2-minute clip that I actually tweeted out today to share with everybody else of Lindy, his immediate thoughts on no goal. And Lindy on that night, it's so crazy he's back as the head coach because he is a central figure of that night, the aftermath, right? Not just post game, but then the rally a couple of days later where he gives the famous no goal quote at the podium to 100,000 people at the square watching that rally. Lindy built, I think, a lot of goodwill that night. I mean, we might love him all the same had it not gone that way, but because he had already been established, right? Like he was here in 1979 all the way through the 80s, was I think, well-liked player. He was a captain. He was a good player. He did everything, forward, defense. Then he showed up as the coach. He won right away. Like he made the playoffs in his first 4 seasons. They won rounds. So no, there wasn't a cup, but he was well on his way to being, he already was there, right? A well-liked figure in Buffalo. But what does a sports fan want more than anything when they've been screwed over? What does a sports fan want when they feel like they got gypped? They want someone to go to war on their behalf. And have you ever seen a coach stand up for his team, his community, city, whatever you want to label it? Lindy did the job that night. What did people want? They wanted Lindy to act how they were acting. They wanted Lindy to be outraged the way they were outraged. And they wanted Lindy to basically be our flag bearer. We think this is a crime. This goal should not have counted. They just raised the cup in our building after scoring a goal that should not have counted. This is complete and utter BS. The NHL is trying to hide behind this mystery memo that, suddenly got sent out explaining a change in the rule, but it was never made public. So, we're just going to tell you that happened after. And, the explanation, Lindy talked about this in the post game that night, that the NHL told him that, we called it a goal because Hall never actually lost possession. When even Lindy snickered at that in the post game. Watch that goal 100 times. Brett Hull lost control of the puck. There's no argument. He lost control of the puck. And that's with the memo that was a mystery and maybe got sent around, maybe didn't anyway. Bettman went on radio after that. This whole cover-up by the NHL. Paul Hamilton told us this morning that the video review guy that was in charge at the NHL, he didn't review the goal. The goal went in. He shook everyone's hand. He got up and he left. He wasn't there. There were 200 people on the ice by the time, not by the time anything. Were they ever going to review it? They probably never were going to. By the time Lindy maybe recognized it and started yelling at Bettman and maybe yelling at officials and whatnot, by that point, there's 200 people on the ice. They're not going to go back and review it. The trophy presentation is already underway. There was a game earlier this past regular season. Sabres and Oilers. It was, I think, a Sunday afternoon game where Dylan Cousins won it in overtime to beat the Oilers. Both teams left the ice. Fans started leaving the arena. Probably 2-3 minutes after the goal went in. Referees get on the mic. The goal's been overturned. It was offsides. Now, 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes go by. The teams have left. Fans had started leaving. They brought the teams back out on the ice. If anyone got undressed, they got redressed. Then they finished overtime. There was only 20 more seconds. Then they went to a shootout. That wouldn't have happened then in 99, in part because one, replay was, I think, newer back then, obviously a lot newer. 2, the sheer amount of people on the ice, the trophy presentation already being underway, you can't put the trophy back in the case. So completely got screwed over. And long story short here, the overall point I'm trying to make is all of that context, all of that outrage, you just wanted someone to fight for you. And Lindy fought for Sabre fans that night and the weeks after. And to this day, he fights for Sabres fans about no goal. And he gave you everything you wanted. It's a big reason why I think he has the reputation he does, and he's as well liked as he is, because that was one of the most important nights in franchise history. It could not have gone worse. The Sabres could not have been screwed over more, and their head coach wasn't having it. That's exactly what you want from him. So, loved Lindy on that night. I also want to say, because I'm 4 years old in that night, proud to say, confirmation from both the parents and the grandparents that the parents were out somewhere watching the game. I was at my grandparents' house that night, and I have confirmation that I was awake through the whole thing, watching the whole thing, all the way through to 2 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning, watching Game 6. They tell me for sure that's true. I don't remember it. So I don't have any stories of my own. I have a couple of good ones, though, to read off. One from our text line. One account of the game. Went to the game, 18 years old, LaFontaine jersey. Went to every tops from Cheektowaga, Fredonia, or Erie. Can't recall where we ended up. Walked into the arena for Game 6 with arrogance, confidence. Sabres were steamrolled through the first 3 rounds. Hasek, of course. Stars came out. Hard game after Stu Barnes tied it. Figured we had them on the ropes. Hasek would lock it down. I remember when the goal went in, the Hull goal, the arena just went silent. You could hear a pin drop. It was a state of disbelief because I believe everyone assumed we were going to win. The crowd just stood there, shifting their gaze between the Sabres or on or adjacent to their bench, and the Stars celebrating. A few minutes later, it started to circulate that the goal should not have counted. It seemed like everything was in motion for the ceremony. Trophies brought out, carpets laid, and there was no way the NHL was going to reverse the call. It was probably the most somber I've seen a crowd walking out of an arena because I think there was too many emotions. Sadness with losing, angry for the way it went down, appreciative of the season, etc. He adds, and I still believe it's a no-goal by rule, by the NHL's interpretation. Hull never controlled the puck prior to it going into the crease. So thank you, Texter, for that account of it. Because I do wonder what the crowd was like. When did people find out? That is way before social media. That's before cell phones. So you're in the crowd. The goal goes in. They don't show the replay on the Jumbotron. Here comes the cup. When do you find out the goal shouldn't have counted? I mean, he's kind of implying people found out slowly, maybe in the crowd. I don't buy, though, that everybody knew that. Because if everyone knew, if they had shown the replay on the Jumbotron, which they did not do, if some rogue Sabre executive or employee did something the NHL would have hated and said, you know what, I'm putting this replay up there. This goal shouldn't have counted. I'm showing everybody. And while the Stars are celebrating, or right before the Stars get the trophy, the video goes up in the arena. Everyone's still there. Go watch the broadcast. Everyone stays to see the cup presented. Most people, at least. If they show that video, what happens? It's a riot. Right? You had the Vancouver riots in the 2011 Stanley Cup final. Things are getting thrown on the ice if that replay gets shown, I think. So I don't think most people knew what was happening. Again, that's a guess because I wasn't there. You tell me. I imagine most people don't find out it should have been no goal until they get into their cars. They turn on the radio and they put the post game on, and then it starts to come through that way. That would be my guess as to when most people that were in the crowd found out. Man, if I could go back in time, though, and I was in charge of that Jumbotron, I would have put the replay up. I would have put I got fired over it, whatever. I'm putting the replay up because they're going to know. I want it known in that moment while they're raising the cup, while Bettman's on the mic. This should not have counted. Lindy was the one man screaming in that arena at Bettman that the goal shouldn't have counted, and I would have loved to just unleash 18,000 more joining him yelling at those guys. What else from that night? I mean, the team, right? Hasek and a team that was so defensive. And in that game, actually, I watched back a lot of that game the other day. The Sabres started out really well. Like, they outshot the Stars. The first period after Dallas scores that first goal, they had one shot on goal the rest of the period. Overtime, the Stars didn't get a shot on goal until 12 minutes in. Like, the Sabres were the better team on that night. I think for the series, no doubt Dallas was a better overall team, and Hasek was the thing that kept the Sabres in it most of the time. They had 50 more shots in the series than the Sabres did. But in that game, it felt like the Sabres were there to win it. And Belfour was just unbelievable. So that's my take on it as someone that, of course, does not remember watching it live. But it's still ridiculous the way it played out. It's, Brett Hull. I'm not going to say I feel sorry for Brett Hull. But let me just say this about Brett Hull. Whenever he's on TV, and he used to be on NBC, so it used to be a lot. You can find these clips on YouTube. Whenever Brett Hull has it thrown in his face, that goal shouldn't have counted, it gets to him. There's a clip someone sent to me on Twitter earlier, Bill Clement, who was hosting for NBC during the 2007 playoffs. The Sabres highlights were up, and the Sabres had got a couple power plays go their way that maybe they shouldn't have gotten. And Bill Clement made some comment of, I guess this is making up for 99, huh? Them getting these calls. And I think he's like, Brett, I think you know what happened in 99. And Hall's just like, he's not taking the bait. He's not playing along. He's like, what happened in 99? I think you get what you deserved. And he's like, what do they deserve? Me to score on them. Like, just, it got to him. He doesn't want to joke around about it. I kind of get that, though. I don't like Brett Hull at all. It does probably suck, though, if you're a kid growing up playing hockey and we've all done this if you played. You dream about in your 6 years old in your driveway. What are you doing? You're doing a make-believe hypothetical scenario where you're in overtime and you score a goal to win the Stanley Cup. Every kid that's played hockey has had that. Hull had that happen. The moment that he probably dreamed about 1,000 times happening. It happened. He won the Stanley Cup by scoring in overtime. And for the rest of his life, the greatest moment of his life playing hockey, he's got to be reminded it was complete BS. It shouldn't have counted. This greatest moment of his career forever will be remembered as, oh no, it shouldn't have counted. So in that way, a little bit of justice, maybe a little less justice than you want. You want the goal to not count, but a little bit of justice on the back end is Brett Hull's got to hear about for the rest of his life, that his greatest achievement, his number one moment of his entire career shouldn't have happened. If that makes you feel any better, probably doesn't, because there should have been a Game 7, or at least that overtime should have continued. 25 years. You want to share your account? Feel free to do that. Text line at Sneaky Joe Sports on Twitter as well. All right, when we come back, Sabres have a lot of cap space. How much do we expect them to spend? We'll go through the numbers when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are brought to you by Policy Genius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policy Genius, the country's leading online insurance marketplace, makes choosing the right policy for your family quick and easy. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quote to see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Be sure to keep tuning in through the NHL draft and free agency next week. And 12 days from today is free agency. We'll be talking plenty about it. Hadi Kalakash, Locked On NHL prospects, we're going to get on next week, and we'll keep running through some free agent ideas of the day. We're not going to have one today because I wanted to get through some McDavid stuff, but we'll get into a bunch more names and options in the coming shows. All right. This relates to free agency. Today, had the realization of how much cap space the Sabres are truly going to have. I'll tell you this. The way it all sounds, I am presently operating as though the Sabres are going to buy out Jeff Skinner. At this moment, here on June 19th, I am treating their situation as though they're going to buy out Jeff Skinner. So, if they buy out Jeff Skinner, what that means for their cap this year only, is $31 million in space heading into the offseason. roughly $31 million in cap space. Massive amount. There are a couple of restricted free agents to sign. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Joki Harju, Peyton Krebs, Jacob Bryson, Cale Clegg. Don't worry about him. Bryson, I could see them bringing back. He had a good end of the season. And then Krebs, Joki Harju, UPL. Let's say, just hypothetically, let's say $5 million for UPL, $3 million for Joki Harju, $2 million for Krebs, $1 million for Bryson. That's $11 million. Let's take a guess here and say those 4 RFAs are going to cost the Sabres about $11 million. That brings their cap space to 20 with the RFAs, with a Skinner buyout. Let's say $20 million. I think it's very realistic. That's what they're going to walk into the offseason with. They're going to buy out Skinner, is my guess, and those 4 players are going to be around that number. $20 million in space. The Sabres have not been a spend to the cap team for 4 years. And we thought it was going to happen even earlier than that. The Sabres made a lot of staff cuts and cleaned house when COVID happened. Fired Jason Botterill, fired a bunch of hockey ops guys, a bunch of guys in other departments as well. Cleaned house financially. Then Terry Pegula fell in love with the idea of taking one last run with Ralph Kruger as the coach and Jack Eichel as the best player. And they went out and they gave Taylor Hall $8 million. And that brought them up to the cap. Prior to that, in that long offseason during the COVID shutdown, we all thought they were not going to be a cap team. We thought they were be an internal cap team that spent below it. Then they got convinced Taylor Hall was a good idea, and that brought them up. Since then, they have not been a cap team. The reason for that is a lot of their players are young, entry-level players. Those guys have since been paid more and more. Now, they get to a place where the young guys are in. Quinn and Peterka will come. Sure, those contracts are coming. But for now, Thompson's done. Cousins is done. Dahlin's done. Power's done. Byram, you'll have an RFA contract next year. Like, they've got, a couple guys. But a lot of the core is already locked up. Samuelson is done. So, what are they going to be? I don't really know what they're going to be. I want to say I wouldn't be surprised either way. Are they going to be a team, if they have $20 million to spend, that spends all of it? Because a lot of teams in the league spend all of it. Vegas spends more than they should, right? Tampa, same thing. Toronto, the Bostons, Floridas, all these great teams, they spend right to the cap every single year. So what do we expect? Do the Sabres spend 20 of the 20? They spend every cent they have. Let's go all in. Friedman keeps talking about this pressure on Kevin Adams this year. Does he act that way? Does he say, I got to win? Not even just I got to win. This team's got to win. Beyond me. Sure, my job might be on the line. But more than that, it's time for this team to freaking win already. So, yeah, we're spending every dollar we have. We're pushing the chips in, and we're going to go get into the playoffs. I could see that. I could see them saying, we're going to spend every cent we've got. Might be hard for them to find players that are worth that. Free agency, you overpay guys sometimes that aren't worth it. There's trades as well. Or are they going to be a team with an internal cap? Are they not going to spend to the cap out of choice? I think that's possible because of other actions that have happened through the years that would imply that they've kind of wanted to be that. A little bit more frugal with spending, whatever you want to call it. I also think it's possible they don't spend to the cap because they can't get people to take their money. I think that's a sad reality, but that's certainly possible as well. I asked this question on our Twitter account @LockedOnSabres, if you want to check it out there. Let's say the Sabres have $20 million in space after all said and done with Skinner and their RFAs. How much of the remaining $20 million do you expect them to spend? And it's pretty even. And I think this goes to show Sabre fans don't really know what to expect from them. When it's time to win, what is their commitment level? What is the Pegula's commitment level? What's the Sabres organization's commitment level? When it's time to win, are you going to spend? And that poll right now, pretty even. All of it, spending all the $20 million, 19.6% of the votes. 15 to 19 of the $20 million, 19% of the votes. 10 to 14 of the 20 million spent, 37% of the votes, that's the highest number, and then less than 10 million, 23% of the vote. Pretty evenly split. Most think 10 to 14%, 37% of the 100% is towards that range. And I might land more in the 15 to 19 range. I really think they're going to try. I really think they're going to try to spend. They're not going to be afraid to go pay free agents. I think they know what time it is. Now, the only thing about this, maybe they stack up one-year deals. Maybe they're willing to give out, I mentioned Max Domi yesterday, a couple of $4 or $5 million one-year deals. Because there are two guys still they have to save money for. They have to save money for Jack Quinn. They have to save money for JJ Peterka. And they have to save money for Bowen Byram. Those three players. They have to keep those three in mind. And those are going to be sizable contracts. So that's why I think it's maybe more likely they look for some veterans that will take a 1 or a 2 year deal. And if we got to overpay you $2 million or $2 million to get you, we're going to be willing to do that because we have all this space. That's what I'm hoping for. And I think it's very realistic to see that happening. But it's a good question. Let me know what you think. Like, what is your expectation level of the Sabres spending? If they have $20 million, what are they going to spend? Because that poll right now I put up on Twitter, like, it's pretty evenly split between they're not going to spend it all, they're going to spend somewhere in the middle, or they're going to spend every penny they got. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup final. Connor McDavid, the all-time greatness of what he's putting together right now. That's when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Hey, if you're looking to get in on the action with McDavid, you want to check out his anytime goal bets, or, I mean, right now, he's minus money at FanDuel Sportsbook to record a point in game number 6. I mean, that's as easy a bet you might think as there is. McDavid to record a point. Game 6 on Friday. Be sure to check out all the props, all the lines. Edmonton's still an underdog. You've got Conn Smythe odds to look at as well over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Not just hockey, of course. Summertime means baseball. A lot of soccer right now with the Euros and the Copa America as well. You can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from Conn Smythe winner to who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Final segment, Locked On Sabres podcast. And we'll wrap things up today by talking about the finals. Through 5 games, still alive. We got 2 for Edmonton, 3 for Florida. And man, Florida looks like they might blow it. We'll see. They're still a favorite, but game 6 in Edmonton with all the momentum the Oilers' direction. And then if they win game 6, who's going to believe Florida's going to win game 7? I mean, they'll be at home, but they would have lost 3 in a row. Funny stat. The last time that the Oilers had lost 3 in a row before this series, they won 16 in a row after. That's when their coach got fired early in the year, Jay Woodcroft. They lost 3 in a row. No, it's more than that in a row. Then that 3-game losing streak ended. They won 16. This 3-game losing streak, well, they've won 2, and I think it's very possible they win the next 2. That's how good they look right now. Barkov does not look the same since that Draisaitl hit. I don't know if he's rattled from it or if he's playing injured or if it's just hard for anybody to keep Connor McDavid down for more than 2 games in a row. That's also very possible. McDavid, 4 more points last night, 8 points in his last 2 games. 8 points. He has set the record most assists in a playoff ever. He is 5 points away from Wayne Gretzky for the record most points in a playoffs ever. And Wayne Gretzky was doing that against goaltenders that didn't know how to play goaltender. McDavid doing that right now is so it's God mode. He is so impressive right now. Dancing through the defense last night to set up a goal. Got a couple of goals on his own. One that he bounced it off Kyle Okposo, by the way. That's one thing that you just can't do with McDavid. That's a coaching thing. You gotta make sure you don't get your 4th line out there against McDavid, because there's the Okposo line, and look, within 30 seconds, goals in the back of the net. It's got to be Barkov or Bennett maybe, but you got to have one of your top 2 lines out there against him at all times. It's critical. McDavid, He's got it all right now. He's the fastest player on the ice by far. He looks confident. He's scoring. He's setting things up. He is the best player in the world. He's the absolute best player in the world. And you really know how high the standard is for him when Barkov was getting all sorts of credit, from me even, but Gretzky called him the greatest defensive forward since the 80s because of some of the things he was doing. He got a lot of credit, Barkov, for keeping McDavid down in the first 3 games. And this is kind of like Andre Iguodala in the NBA Finals. He won Finals MVP one year because he held LeBron under 30 points per game. LeBron had like 29, 10, and 7 was his average. This is what Barkov was doing. Oh, you held McDavid to 3 points in the first 3 games. That's how high the bar is for McDavid, is that when he's at a 1 point per game, it's seen as this incredible accomplishment at keeping him at that. And then he rattles off 8 in the next 2. If he breaks the record, I want to say at this point, even if he doesn't, I think right now he should win the Conn Smythe no matter what. If Florida wins Game 6 in Edmonton, I think McDavid should still win the Conn Smythe. And I think certainly if he somehow breaks the point record and loses in Game 7 while breaking the point record, it'll be an outrage to me if he doesn't win the Conn Smythe. It'll tell me no skater will ever win the Conn Smythe again in a losing effort. Now, to be fair, that's already very rare. If you look at the history of the Conn Smythe, some losing players have won it. Most of them are goaltenders. Actually, all but one are goaltenders. The last goalie to win it that in a losing effort was J.S. Jaguar in 2003. Ron Hextall won it in a losing effort in 1987. Glenn Hall, goalie of the Blues, won it in 68. Roger Crozier won it for the Detroit Red Wings, former Sabres goaltender, in 66. Reggie Leach, the only skater to ever win the Conn Smythe in a losing effort, the 76 finals for the Flyers. He had 19 goals in 16 games. Record-breaking. Historic. That's how he did it. That's what McDavid's doing right now. Best player on the ice. It's indisputable. He is the best player in the world. He is the best player on the ice. He is a historic production right now. And especially if he gets that record, there's no turning it away from him, in my opinion. They might do it anyway. The weird thing would be the mechanics. Do you award him the Conn Smythe after losing? Like, maybe if it's in Edmonton, that's okay. Because he'll get a cheer. Hey, maybe that's a smart thing. You get the Oilers fans in a good mood before you give the Panthers the trophy, so it's not just them booing the whole thing. If it's Game 7 in Florida and the Panthers win, and McDavid wins the Conn Smythe, do you award it to him on the ice? Maybe you do it in the locker room because it would almost feel awkward or just feel weird. Like, are the Panthers players there clapping for him while they've just won the Stanley Cup? That would just be a little strange to me, the mechanics of it. So maybe if they win in Florida, they would give it to McDavid in the locker room. But I think he should win it. I think he should win it no matter what the result of the series is. But if he goes on to win this series, Mount Rushmore of hockey, instantly. Something no one's done, back from 3-0 down, setting records, best player on the ice, best player in the world. He's able to put that together. It's Gretzky, it's Bobby Orr, for me, it's Hasek, and then it's McDavid. Like, the greats of the game, whatever you want to do for your Mount Rushmore, I think McDavid should be on it if he's able to come back in this series and do something that no one's done since the 1940s, and no one's certainly done in the modern day of NHL hockey. So, great series. Friday night, we get Edmonton and Florida in Edmonton. It's going to be the loudest arena in hockey history, I would imagine. We'll talk more about the series as it progresses here. Maybe it wraps up on Friday. We'll see. We'll talk more about Sabres free agency stuff. Hadi Kalakash will be coming up as well on the NHL draft. A lot to get to. If you want to share your memories on the 99 Game 6 result and the controversy and how it went for you, how you were watching in the arena, let me know what happened and let me know your memory. Thanks for listening today to the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.